We're going to go ahead and get started. Now, we are in 1 Samuel still, so if you left and you came back, we're still there, and we'll get you a little bit caught up today. But this is the book where it starts with the first king of Israel. So as the book opens, you have Samuel. Samuel's a judge, and he's going to be the last judge that Israel has. He's also a prophet, and God tasks him with finding the first king of Israel. So as he starts to look around for the first king of Israel, he finds Saul. And Saul is the most likely to succeed. He's a head taller than everybody else. He's somebody that you just look at and you go, that's a leader. And so as he was a king, it started out, everything was going well. And everybody was excited about Saul's leadership until he started to do some things. And he started to disobey God in specific ways. And it says that God took the Spirit of the Lord from him and put it on David, and David's anointed king. So as this starts to happen, though, it says that just Saul starts to lose his mind, and he starts to throw spears at David and all of these things that he's starting to do because he's starting to feel the power shift. He's starting to feel like the people don't care about him, and he starts to become more consumed with himself and more consumed with retaining power than he is with any of the people that he's supposed to be caring for. And so it all centers around this guy named David, who Saul has as a part of his court, David serving him, but Samuel went to Saul and anointed him king. And so David's known from a very young age that he's going to be the next king of Israel. He doesn't know how that's going to happen, but he knows that it's going to happen. So David, he's just been a faithful warrior for Saul throughout the entire book. He started out his career by killing Goliath. It says that, he had the faith to go out and he took on the giant and he won. He also, as Saul took David into his service, David started to lead the army. Saul gave him men to command and sent him out to battle. And it says that he was always victorious in the battle. But that was his side gig because, his main job was as a court musician. And like all guitar players, they've got their side gig so that they can, because there's really a musician, but I've got this thing I do on the side, just pays the bills temporary until my music takes off. So, David's a musician in that way. And then he's also the king's son-in-law. He married the king's daughter, and so, and then he's best friends with the king's son. He has this covenant with Jonathan. And Jonathan, we're going to see today, cares about David, wants the best for David, and understands that David's going to be the next king, and he's okay with it. And that just speaks volumes about who Jonathan is and the type of people that David has attracted around him. And so David is been faithful. His service for Saul has been impeccable. He's never once in his service for Saul went, well, why do I have to serve this guy? He's always been more than willing to serve Saul. And Saul's been like a father to him because David's been serving him since a very young age. So, but see, here's the problem. Saul wants David dead, and he's made a couple attempts on his life. Today, he's going to make a couple more, and so things are going to get very uncomfortable for David. So it's because Saul has been seeking his life, Jonathan warned him, and David ran. Because it was never in David's mind, I'm going to fight for the kingship. That's not something that David is going to ever do. So he decides it's time to run, it's time to get out of here, it's time to get some space between myself and Saul. And so David is on the run. And so it says, as David's in the wilderness, all of these men start to come around him. It says about 600 different men start to come around him. And it's not, the leaders and the pillars of community. It's people who are in debt, people who, are not really the type of people that you would assume would, be someone that you want to spend time with. But as they look to David, they see somebody who's a leader. They see somebody who they want to gather around. Because in him, they go, this is a guy we can believe in. This is a guy we want to follow. And so he starts to gather all of these really outcasts of society around him. And the sum total is about 600 men who are with him. And so they're all in the wilderness. They're all running with David because he's hiding from Saul. And so that's where our story picks up today. It's in 1 Samuel chapter 23, starting at verse 1. When David was told, look, the Philistines are fighting against Keilah and are looting the threshing floors, he inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I go and attack these Philistines? And the Lord answered him, go attack the Philistines and save Keilah. So you have David who's hanging out in the wilderness, and he hears one of the cities of Israel is going to be attacked. And this is of concern to him, so he starts to inquire of the Lord, should I go and should I help this city? But you see, the people that he's with are not too sure. Now, today we're going to be playing a little bit of Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego, basically. David's in a lot of different cities. So I'm going to try to track you with him. You know, I'm not sure that we're not all familiar with this geography of ancient Israel, but this is where he's going to be today. And he's going to be all over the place, and we'll follow around. And I just do that because I like to be John Madden. We go X and O's, and then we make a route over here. So there's a lot of stuff that's going to be happening today, and there's a lot of different places that David's going to be. But he starts here in the city of Keilah, and he goes down. But David's men said to him, "Here in Judah we are afraid. How much more than if we go to Keilah against the Philistine forces?" Now, David's men, the 600 men that have started to follow him, they're like, "Okay, David, look, we're okay with this whole, hiding from Saul thing. And, he's completely nuts, so he doesn't have the best military strategy. So it's pretty easy to evade somebody that's completely insane. So, we're okay with that. But you're asking us to go and fight the Philistines." Now, we've talked about this before. The Philistines are the most technologically advanced civilization at this time. They have a military commander who knows what he's doing. They have a lot of military technology. And so his men are like, "We don't want to fight the Philistines. There's just 600 of us. We're okay with what we've been doing, David. We're with you. We want to, gather around you. We want to be here for you. But when we're just trying to avoid Saul, it's a whole different deal than fighting the Philistines. They are too much. We are no match for them." But David, wanting to encourage his men, inquires of God again. So once again, David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered him, "Go down to Keilah, for I am going to give the Philistines into your hand." So David and his men went to Keilah, fought the Philistines, and carried off their livestock. And he inflicted heavy losses on the Philistines and saved the people of Keilah. Saul was told that David had gone to Keilah, and he said, "God has delivered him into my hands, for David has imprisoned himself by entering a town with gates and bars." And Saul called up all of his forces for battle to go down to Keilah. So, David has gone down, and he's secured a victory for Israel, because remember, we saw Keilah is right in the middle of Israel's territory. It was Saul's job to go and defend these guys. He's the king. The king's role is to fight for his people. But he is not at all concerned or interested in Keilah. If David's hearing about this, of course Saul's hearing about it as well. And so David, because he loves the people in the country and because he wants to save them, he goes and risks his life for the people of Keilah when that is Saul's job. Saul doesn't care. Because you see, Saul stopped being king long ago. He stopped caring about the people, and he stopped working for their good, and he started his single obsession, which is killing his most faithful servant, David. And so, as he's only caring about finding and eliminating David, David's the one who's working on behalf of the people, and he goes and he risks his life, and he gets victory for the city of Keilah, and only then does Saul concern himself with the city, because David's there, and he's locked himself inside. And so, it says that David's inside the city, and Saul hears that he's there, and so David gets message, Saul's coming. And so David is concerned because of everything that he's been experiencing, and he knows that Saul has it out for him. And so he says that David inquires of the Lord. And this is great because God's got just these two-word responses for David in this whole story. And so David goes, "Is Saul coming?" And the Lord answers, "He will." David goes, are the citizens of the city, are they going to turn me over to Saul? They will. Oh, it's that whole thing where he's like, "Man, I just got done fighting for these people, and they're going to hand me over. What's the deal?" You would think he's just, saved them. He's just ran the Philistines off on their behalf. So why wouldn't they give him shelter? Why wouldn't they say, "No, Saul, kick rocks. We're going to let David stay here"? But you see, last week, Ron talked about this. Last week, Saul found out that the priests had helped David as he started to run. And so Saul, in a response to that, wiped out the entire city of Nob, just annihilated them. So if Saul is willing to kill a city full of priests, a city full of just average people, not a bridge too far for him. So they are fully aware that if they're going to help David, if they're going to stand with David, most likely Saul's going to completely destroy their city. So they have really no incentive to help David because they're like, well, David, thanks for saving us and all, but we prefer to be alive to dead, and we'd like our families to live as well, so we're going to hand you over to Saul. It's nothing personal. It's just, Saul's crazy. He's going to kill us all. So we choose life. Sorry. And so David, who's just won this victory for Goliath, is forced to run. And so it says that David is on a run again because he's dealing with an insane king. And so, once again, where in the world is David? So he's in Goliath, which is right here, and he decides to run down to Ziph. So, boop, goes right there. That's where he is now. So he heads down there. And so Saul's son, Jonathan, went to David at Horesh, which is in Ziph, and helped him find strength in God. Don't be afraid, he said. My father will not lay a hand on you. You will be king over Israel, and I will be second to you. Even my father knows this. So as David is hiding in the wilderness, probably going, I know that God called me to do something, king. I'm not really sure when that's going to happen, but it seems like things just continue to go worse. And so he's hiding out in the wilderness, and it says that Jonathan goes to him and goes, look, David, I know that you're going to be king. I know that God has called you to that. My father knows that you're going to be king. Trust in God. Be strengthened, because my father is not going to lay a hand on you, because God has a plan for you. He says you need to understand that God is behind all of this, and ultimately it will make sense, but you need to trust. And so Jonathan goes down and goes, look, I know that you're going to be king. My father knows that you're going to be king. You just got to tough it out. And so it says that he encourages David, and Jonathan goes, and when you're king, I'm going to stand there beside you, and I'm going to give my life for your kingship. You see, Jonathan's supposed to be the next king of Israel. He's Saul's oldest son. And he's going to David and going, look, I know that you're going to be king, and I'm okay with it because I want to be in the center of God's will. So I'm going to follow you, David. But just be encouraged. Be strengthened. So, it says that as he's down in the wilderness of Ziph, that the men that live in that area go up to Saul, and they go, okay, Saul, we don't want you to kill us like everybody in Nob, but David's there. We saw him. You should totally come and get him, because we know he's there. We just want you to be aware, because we don't want to be dead. So come and get him, Saul. He's staying there. And so Saul says to him, oh, thank you so much for being concerned with me. It means a lot to me. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back to your land, and I want you to watch David. I want you to find out where he's going to go to sleep, and I want you to find out where he hangs out during the day, because he's very crafty. And so I just love that. Saul's like, he's a sneaky guy. So, find out where the sneaky guy's staying. And then I'll come down. So it says that as they go back to find David, they see that he's started to figure it out, that they've gone and talked to Saul. So he goes to the desert of Mon. And so the men go, all right, Saul, we have more of an exact location for where David is. Come down and get him. So it says that Saul comes down with his army, and David's in the desert there, and it says that Saul starts to get really close to David. There's a mountain in between them. Saul and his forces are on this side, and David and his forces are on this side, and it starts to be that thing where Saul goes this way, and David's men go this way, and this way. I don't know if you've ever, I grew up the youngest of three boys, so I was always running, but, I remember the couch, if we could get that between us, that means that I had a chance. So I remember, I'm standing on this side of the couch, and they're on this side of the couch. And I've done this with my kids, too, where, you're just kind of running around, and, you move this way, and everybody moves this way. And you got to keep the couch between you. That's the only thing saving your life. And so David's doing that with a mountain. Saul goes this way, David goes this way. And then, they kind of switch back and forth. And it says that Saul finally, gets a plan and starts to split his forces. And they're coming around the mountain. They're going to choke off David and his escape. And at that time, the Philistines attack again. And so Saul's like, man, I got to go do my job now. His hobby's killing David. He has other stuff he's supposed to be doing. And so as the Philistines invade, he goes, oh, we'll have to kill David another day. Let's go and let's make sure that we go take care of, the stuff that he was appointed for. It's important to do your job. So he goes after and he starts to fight the Philistines. And David is saved that day because, Saul got distracted with something else. And so this is when David runs again. Where in the world is David and his men? So he's in Ziph and he goes to En-Gedi. I grew up in that time frame. Don't judge me. So he goes from Ziph to En-Gedi, and that's where he is in the stronghold there. And so it says Saul, after he chases off the Philistines, he can get back to the things that he really enjoys, hunting David. So he goes to En-Gedi because he has been informed, because everybody's willing to tell Saul where David is, as we discussed, so they won't be killed. And they go, he's in En-Gedi. And so it says that Saul is searching for David there. And he came to the sheep pens along the way, and a cave was there. And Saul went to relieve himself. David and his men were in the back of the cave. So let me clear up this very mysterious Hebrew term for you. To relieve himself means he goes into the cave to tinkle. Exact Hebrew translation. He goes into the cave to take care of business that people tend to do. And so it says, as he goes into this cave, David and his men are actually at the back of it. So you got to imagine, they're sitting there and they're trying to run from Saul and not be noticed. But Saul comes into the cave by himself to do what you do in a cave. So you got to imagine all the men are like, oh, it's Saul. David, it's totally Saul. Can you believe he showed up in the same cave that we're in? Now's your time, David. The men said to him, this is the day the Lord spoke of when he said to you, I will give your enemy into your hands for you to deal with as you wish. Then David crept up unnoticed and cut off the corner of Saul's robe. So he's in there relieving himself, and David kind of does the whole army crawl thing, over-exaggerated as guys are. He cuts off the corner of his robe, and then they come back, and you got to figure out, he's like, oh, look what I got, because guys never act like that. We're like, I got the corner of his robe. And they're like, that's cool. No, he probably ran back. He's like, oh, yeah, I totally cut it off. He didn't even see me. It was awesome. But it says that immediately as he does this, he's struck with it. Now, you see, here's the important thing about a robe in the ancient world. The king's robe was embroidered in a specific way so that it would mark him as the king, because they didn't have TV. They didn't have posters. They didn't have pictures. Most of the time, you would never see the king. Most of the time, you'd have no idea outside of what his name was, who the king was. Because the king's not doing, tours, kissing babies. He's the king. He sits in the palace and commands armies. So most people would not see the king in their lifetime. So the king wore very ornate material like his robe and things like that so that everybody would know who he was. Because the worst thing that you can do is go, hey, who's this bum that just wandered into town? That's the king. Oh, my bad. I mean, that's kind of what they're dealing with. So the king wore things that would denote him as the king. And so as David creeps up and cuts off a corner of his robe, he's cutting off the very signifying sign of Saul's authority. And so when David does that, it says that immediately he regrets it. Now, I've experienced this. I don't know if you have, where you do something that seems like a good idea, and then immediately you regret it because you realize it wasn't. And this may be more of a shared experience for those of us in the room who are men who are married, because you say it because you think it sounds funny in your head, only as it comes out, you're like, she seems to not understand my humor because that was really funny, but she seems angry. That's a different reaction than I was No, I'm sure that you never do that. That's just me. Because I live my life and do things that I think are going to be funny, and that's my determining factor of whether or not I'm going to do it. I probably should change that at some point. Maybe. Oh, maybe next year. But, it says that he immediately feels guilty because we've all been there. We've all done that thing that we're like, it seemed like a really good idea at the time. Probably wasn't. So it says that David takes the corner of his robe and he goes out and he goes, Saul, King, I'm sorry. It says that he falls down before Saul and he goes, Saul, I cut off the corner of your robe. I'm sorry I did that. But here's the reason why. I don't know if somebody has incited you against me. I don't know who's whispering in your ear, David is your enemy. I'm not. I had the opportunity to kill you, and I'm not going to. Here's the corner of your robe. I probably shouldn't have done it, but I just wanted to prove to you that when you're in the cave, I had every opportunity to kill you. My men wanted me to. But I wouldn't let them touch you because I'm not going to raise my hand against you because God has anointed you king. And that's not anything that we do in the nation of Israel. So I'm sorry. But who incited you against me? Who told you that I'm your enemy? Because, if a man has his enemy in a cave, he's going to kill him. I didn't kill you. Because I would never imagine doing that. Because, let the Lord judge between us. If I've ever done anything wrong to you, let God take care of me. But if you've wronged me, let God take care of you because God's the one who's in control of all of this. But I'm not your enemy. I'm insignificant. I am a poor kid from a small family. I have no dreams of being king. I've loved you my entire life. You've been like a father to me. I would never act against you. So as David says this, he goes, why are you chasing me, Saul? What is this all about? So it seems that Saul has this rare moment of clarity where he says, when David finished saying this, Saul asked, is that your voice, my son David? And he wept aloud. It seems like at this moment, maybe Saul figured it out. He's going, what am I doing? Why am I chasing you? What is this all about? You're more righteous than I, he said. You have treated me well, but I have treated you badly. You have just now told me about the good you did to me. The Lord delivered me into your hands, but you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him get away unharmed? May the Lord reward you well for the way you treated me today. I know that you will surely be king and that your kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. We have David who knows that he's anointed. We have David's men who are like, oh, here's Saul, kill him because you're going to be the next king. You have Jonathan telling him he's going to be the next king. And now you have King Saul going, I know that you're going to be king, David. He's hearing it from all sides. That he's going to be king. He's not yet. But even Saul knows that God has appointed David the next king. Now swear to me by the Lord that you will not kill off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's family. So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. So it's standard procedure when you seize control that you would kill all the other people who could be the inheritors of the throne. So all of Saul's children would be a threat to David. So he's thinking, David's going to seize control and he's going to kill off my family. So Saul wants to make David promise that he's not going to do it. But David has no intention of doing that. Remember, David's best friend is Jonathan. He would never dream of killing Saul's family. He loves Saul. He's a part of Saul's family. He's a son-in-law. But he says, no, I would never do that because Saul's knowing that he's on his way out, but he just wants to make sure that his family's going to be cared for. And so it's a happy ending, right? You're like, oh, finally, they talked it out. And now they're going to hug and be besties again. It's great. Saul and David could figure this out. So I'm glad that they could have this happy ending. They really sorted some stuff out. I think they made some steps towards reconciliation. It's going to be great. Now that they're back together, it's like they've got these two brothers in arms back together. They can do some great stuff for the nation of Israel. Saul can focus on reigning. David can be leading the army. But you see, the fact is, old habits do die hard. The men of Ziph once again went to Saul at Gibeah and said, is not David hiding on the hill of Hachilah, which faces Jeshimon? So Saul went down to the desert of Ziph with his 3,000 select Israelite troops to search for David there. So we now have David who was here, Now he's back here. And now we know where in the world is David, future king of Israel. And he's back there. So then David set out and went to the place where Saul had camped. He saw where Saul and Abner, son of Ner, the commander of the army, had lain down. Saul was laying inside the camp with the army encamped around him. So now Saul is pursuing David again because they talked it all out and came to an agreement. So Saul's chasing him again, and they make camp in the wilderness, and it says that David goes and sees, oh, okay, here's the camp. I know exactly where we are. So he has a plan. So it says that he goes back to his men, and he goes, okay, I need a volunteer who's going to go with me into the camp because this is going to be good. So any takers? And so it says that Abishai says, okay, I'm going to go with you, David. What are we going to do? So they go into the camp, and it says everybody's asleep because God has sent a real deep sleep on them. But they're all, capped around Saul because they're supposed to be protecting them. And so it says that Saul's asleep there, and he's got his spear stuck in the ground. And it's when they are walking into the camp that Abishai comes and he finds Saul, and he's like, oh, Saul's right here. David, I've got a great idea. I'll take a spear, stick him, pin him to the ground, he'll be dead. I won't even hit him twice. Just once, dead, done. I'm willing to do that for you. Seriously, I got this. I'm going to handle it. David goes, no, we're not going to do that. And Abishai's like, no, it's right here. Just done. And David goes, no, this is not how this is going to happen. He goes, grab his spear, grab his water jug, because I'm not against petty theft. Murder, draw my line. But he says, grab those things because we need him to know that we've been here. But we're not going to kill God's anointed. He goes, God will deal with him. He may fall in battle, but God's going to deal with Saul. We're not going to be the ones that kill him. So it says that they take the spear and the water jug, and they leave camp, and they go back to their side of just outside of the camp. And David, once again, spares Saul life. And then David has the spear in his hand, and he goes, hey, Abner, wake up, buddy. And Abner goes, oh, who's calling me? Is it David, the son of Jesse? He goes, yeah, here's the thing. I was just in your camp, and you guys should all be killed because your job's to protect the king, and you're not doing your job. So David starts to mock Abner. He's like, I was just there. I could have killed him if I wanted to because you are terrible at your job. You and all your men. Awful. It says about that time that Saul starts to wake up. And David has another conversation with Saul because Saul goes, David, is that you again? And David goes, yeah, it's me. I have your spear, which, once again, the spear would have been different than all the other spears because it belongs to the king. It would have been more decorated, more ornate, the symbol that this belongs to the king. So David goes, I have your spear, Saul. Because I'm not going to kill you. So why are you still pursuing me? It's kind of like, didn't we already have this talk? Didn't I tell you that I care about you? I'm not going to kill you? Here we are again. You're here pursuing me, and I'm running. What gives? He goes, are you not going to be happy until you chase me out of the homeland where God is worshipped? He goes, I have served God my entire life. I inquire of him for guidance in how I live my life, and you want to chase me out of the land where God is worshipped. Why are you doing this? Why is this happening again? Why is this the same story once again where you're chasing me and I'm running? Then Saul said, I have sinned. Come back, David, my son, because you considered my life precious today. I will not try to harm you again. Surely I've acted like a fool and have been terribly wrong. So I'm like, yeah, right, sure. I'm going to come home. You've only tried to kill me every single opportunity that you've had. Not going to happen. So here's the king's spear, David answered. Let one of your young men come over and get it. The Lord rewards everyone for their righteousness and faithfulness. So he goes, look, I've been righteous in my relationship with you. I've acted justly. I've never considered acting against you. Let God judge between the two of us because I've been righteous in our relationship. He said, I've also been faithful to you, my king. I've done everything that you've ever asked me. So come and get your spear. I just wanted to show you that I mean you no harm. And I'm not your enemy. And the Lord delivered you into my hands today, but I would not lay a hand on the Lord's anointed. As surely as I valued your life today, so may the Lord value my life and deliver me from all trouble. Then Saul said to David, may you be blessed, David, my son. You will do great things and surely triumph. So David went on his way, and Saul returned home. And David retains his integrity. You see, David had every reason to kill Saul. I mean, the guy's trying to kill him. And everybody would have probably understood. You know, he's got his men who are like, David, do it. Take his life. This is how God is going to make you king. He has Jonathan who's going, my dad's not going to harm you. You're going to be the next king. And even Saul is telling him he's going to be king. So David knew what God had called him to do. He knew exactly how his life was going to turn out. So when he has the opportunity to take this kind of shortcut to get things done, it makes perfect sense. Now, you got to remember, David's not just camping with the guys. He's living in the wilderness. So it's not like he's like, yeah, you know, we're just hanging out, making s'mores, having fun. Just me and my 600 friends hanging out in the desert. It's fun. No, he's having immense amounts of hardship because he's sleeping on rocks when he knows at some point he's going to be sleeping in a palace. And the only thing he has to do is kill the guy who's asleep in front of him. But he knows that if he's going to maintain his integrity, he's not going to take a shortcut. You know, it's that whole thing where if he would have done this, if he would have had himself or one of his men kill Saul, there always would have been kind of that tainted part of his kingship, like that black mark that everybody remembers. He's been a great king, but you know, he became king by assassinating the old one. You know, it's like winning the Super Bowl, but in the championship game, you deflated balls to get there. You know, it's just kind of tainted. So, you know, everybody would remember that he did something that was just questionable murder the previous king. Even though he's insane, still murdered the previous king to get there. Everybody would remember that, and his kingship would have been tainted. So he wants to maintain his integrity. So he did what was right, and he was faithful to the current king. Because David will not take the kingship. He knows that God has called him, and so he's content. He goes, you know, let God sort this out. Let him be the one that, you know, kills Saul in battle, because I'm not going to be the one that does it. Because I'm not going to force God's plan for my life. I'm willing to wait and trust him to lead me there. So David is perfectly content to wait on the Lord. He's not going to take the opportunity that he's had to take a shortcut to the kingship. So it says that he waits on the Lord because he knows that God is going to work out this plan in his timing. Psalm 40, written by David, says this: I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and he heard my cry. God in the life of David is developing this real peculiar patience. It's a patience that is not natural. It's a patience that is supernatural in the way that he knows all of these things. God has laid them before him, and at some point he's going to be king. But right now, he understands that it's not the right time, so he's going to wait in patience and know that in God's time, it will happen. And that's not right now. And so he's not willing to take shortcuts. You know, I've been in different circumstances where I'm like, you know, if God would just listen to me on how this would all play out, it'd be more efficient. And efficiency's good. You get more things done. But yet, God's not really interested in my input on how he should govern all of creation. Oddly enough, never really asks. You see, so David is learning to trust God through the patience that he's developing in this circumstance. And I feel like, in my life, and you may have felt this way too, you're like, I know that God's called me to something, but why isn't anything happening? What do I have to wait for here? It may be your career, or it may be, you're in school, and maybe even school later in your life. You're like, if I could just get through this, if God could just show up and work, and I could get on to the next thing, that'd be great. Because being in this place, it's awful. But see, in that moment, God's teaching you to wait on his timing, and you're learning to develop trust because you're given the opportunity to go, okay, I don't know how this is all going to work out. I don't know how we're going to get to the point in which God wants me to be, but I'm just going to trust him to get me there. And it's in those times that your faith is tested. But when you learn to seek God with patience, you develop trust in him so that you can wait. Because in God's timing, everything is so much better than we can imagine. So we don't take shortcuts to get there. We wait for God to move and lead us to the place that he wants us to be. So I don't know how much experience you have with Scripture, or this may be your first time in church for a long time, but I'm going to pray in a moment here. And if you've never made a decision to follow after Jesus, you're going to have an opportunity to do so. So let's pray together. God, I thank you. I thank you for your word. I thank you that as we learn to trust and seek you, and as we start to develop this patience that's necessary in our life, you give us strength if we trust in you. And we know that if we wait for your timing, things are beyond anything we could ever imagine. Sometimes it just hurts to wait. But if anybody in this room has never given their life to seek after you, we have that opportunity to do that now. And if you've never prayed to accept Christ and you want to do that today, you have this opportunity. When we talk about Jesus, we talk about him as our Savior, because we can't save ourselves. We talk about Jesus as our friend, and he shows us our world from his perspective. We learn to see people the way that he sees them, and he changes our lives. We talk about him as our king, and we learn to do what the king says. So if you want to follow Jesus today, just pray these words with me. God, I need you. I want to trust you with my life. I want to seek you with patience. But I want to know you as my Savior, my friend, and my King. God, Jesus, come into my life. Clean out all of the stuff that's in there. And help me to lay down my life and to trust you